Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Progeny Podcast. This week I'm joined by Hasan Kubba, author, entrepreneur and startup strategist. Today inshallah we'll speak about how someone can launch their own business, having unfair advantages and advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. So Hasan, assalamu alaikum. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start off by, what is a startup strategist? That's what you do. What does that mean for those people that are just sort of listening to us today, but thinking they understand the author, the entrepreneur, but the startup strategist? What does that exactly entail?
So startup strategist, that's one very shorthand way of describing what we do. Well, we help that by we I mean Ash and myself, and with the Unfair Advantage training company, we help startup founders or aspiring startup founders get started with their business, launching it, getting it going, getting their first customers. So the areas that I kind of focus on, the way I break it down, is we help them start their startup, grow their startup, and raise funding for their startup. So get funding.
And you mentioned someone there, Ash. Who's that? And
Ash Ali is my co-author on the Unfair Advantage book. So it's called The Unfair Advantage, How Startup Success Starts With You. So it's all about how at the root of success in business, or to be honest, it actually applies everywhere in life, to be honest with you. It all starts with you and what your strengths are and what your unfair advantages are. So by strengths, people usually talk about personal strengths. So, I'm really good at something. I'm really good at writing, or I'm really good at coding. But we also want to include circumstantial strengths. And that's what we mean by unfair advantages. Let's say you have access to a lot of people with money who can fund your startup. That's an unfair advantage. Let's say you're exceptionally bright and smart. Maybe you started coding when you were like a little kid and you're really good at coding. So, for example, that's another unfair advantage that you might have. Or just the fact that for some reason or other, you're famous. You know a lot of people. You have high status, or you have good connections.
You're from a good family.
Whatever it might be.
So that's an unfair.
That's under status, right? So we've broken down the unfair advantages into a framework. And Ash Ali is the one who came up with the original concept of the unfair advantage. And I helped him develop it, and I co-wrote the book with him. And we initially met in a business dinner, networking dinner. And he had just had success with Just Eat, the big takeaway company, delivery company in the UK. And all over Europe, actually, they are. And he was the first marketing director in the UK. So only the third senior member of staff. And startups in the early days, they don't have any money to spend on big salaries. So he had equity. That's what they usually give out, is shares in the startup. So he had shares in Just Eat, and then they went IPO. So that means they went in the stock market in 2014 and did really well. They got 1.5 billion pounds on the stock market. That's how much they were valued.
Wow.
So they did very well. Ash had a piece of that. So he did well himself. He started angel investing, and that's basically how I started to get involved with him. He introduced me to the world of tech startups and this way of creating wealth. Even if you're very poor, it's a very fast way of creating wealth. They say you can't get rich overnight, and you can't do that in startups overnight, but it's much, whereas it's before it used to be maybe a 30-year time frame. With startups, you can get rich 5 to 10-year time frame. It's kind of like possible. Very difficult, but possible. So people are drawn to that world.
Okay, so now someone's listening to this, and they've probably just finished university, looking for a job, and of course looking to get rich quickly. So and you mentioned you help people start up their business, and you mentioned angel investment.
Yeah,
what's that about, and how does that get you that?
Yeah, good question. It's a weird name, angel investing.
Yeah.
It just means, and I didn't know this name until I got involved. So my background is digital marketing. So online marketing. I would help local businesses get a website and market themselves, get higher up on Google, kind of do ads and stuff like that. So that's kind of the digital marketing world. And then there's the tech startup world, which is like based around Silicon Valley startup companies, which then become giants like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. All of these are kind of tech startups at one point, and now they're one of the biggest companies in the world. Angel. So when I got introduced to this world, I got used to all the new jargon and all the vocab that they use. Angel investing just means an individual who's done well for himself, who wants to invest his personal money, compared to venture capital funding, which is they have a fund that people have put into, and then those people where it's their job, their full-time job, to run that fund and try and find startups to invest in. And usually angel investors, who are these individuals, they invest at an earlier stage with lower sums of money, and venture capitalists invest at a later stage with bigger sums of money. So it's kind of how it works.
Would you, if someone's into that, would you encourage them to go into it today, or
To become
with
an
the
investor?
with the current market?
Well, investing in tech startups is very, very risky. So usually the best way to do it is if you have so much money that you can take a lot of place a lot of bets, metaphorically speaking, well, or maybe even literally, because you never know what's going to succeed. Even, no one knows 100%. There's a lot of luck involved. There's some factors that you could look at, and they definitely do look at it if they know what they're doing. And that's what I was doing, actually. I was sitting with Ash as startups were pitching us, and it was kind of that Dragon's Den vibe where we would sit there and they would pitch us. In America, it's called Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And I started to learn about pitching, about what they look for in startup companies, what they're happy with in terms of their progress that they've made. And just to clarify as well, startup companies are like things like apps or websites or software companies, things which are more kind of digital. The old name for it is IT, but kind of that's almost falling out slowly out of favor for tech. Is kind of the new way of describing it.
Well, obviously, I got to. I know you from before, but I was introduced to having you on this show because of the TED Talk that you did a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Which was quite popular. A lot of people were sharing the talk. How did you get into that? And why the topic that you picked? Obviously, you spoke about this unfair advantage.
Yeah. How did I get into that? So I would never have thought, at the end of my talk, I actually say that I never would have expected I'll stand up on stage and give a TED Talk at one point. But there I was doing it.
And now you're doing a podcast.
And now I'm doing a podcast. Never thought I'd become an author, a published author. And, there's a picture of me that I have in the talk where I'm signing a publishing deal with one of our favorite publishers. And I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, to be honest with you. I never thought of that as a path that I can go down, as a career path. And I didn't have any career guidance. But the question was, how did I get a TED Talk? Well, it came from having a good idea. So TED is all about ideas worth sharing. And when we developed this concept, this framework that we had for the unfair advantage and something called the Miles framework, which I can explain as well, that's when we thought about how we're kind of brought up to believe that especially in the West, I'm talking about, that we live in a meritocracy, that if you work hard enough, if you're smart enough, if you're talented enough, you're going to succeed. And all it takes is belief, and especially the self-help kind of gurus who they'll say, just believe and work
in
hard.
yourself and work hard.
Exactly. Anything, you can achieve anything. And I'm not completely disagreeing with that. There's a lot of power and truth in that, but it's not quite scientifically true. Not anyone can achieve anything. Not anyone can get any station in life. It's not quite that achievable. There is kind of a realism factor that you need to factor into it. And that factor is the idea that if you look at somebody, let's say somebody like Jeff Bezos, who's the richest man in the world right now, the CEO and founder of Amazon. It's not like, oh yeah, if I work hard, I'll be richer than Jeff Bezos, Like it's simply not that easy. Even Elon Musk, who's another super rich guy, the guy who did Tesla and SpaceX, originally he did PayPal. He says that I started these companies thinking that they'd fail. Right? I thought my chance, not 100%, but he says, I thought my chances of success were very, very low, but I went for it anyway. And ultimately there's a lot of luck thrown into the mix. There's a lot of fate. Some people can consider it. Some people can think of it in many different ways. But ultimately, you're not in 100% control of your own outcomes, of your own success, let's say. You're partially in control of it. So what I thought of as being two kind of mindsets to have. One is the belief in meritocracy and hard work. 100% is sort of the belief in the American dream. If you work hard enough, you can make it. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, the other extreme, is that it's all luck. That guy's just lucky. That's why he's if they see anyone who's done well in life, they think they're just
he
lucky.
was at the right place at the right time, and then it happened for him.
Or even worse, or he's evil, right? Sometimes some people believe that rich people get rich by being unethical, and maybe there is some truth to that in some cases. Avoiding tax. Yeah. So it's a case of what kind of mindset do we have about wealth, and what kind of mindset, first of all, is accurate and true, And also, what is an empowering mindset as well? Right? So what can not stop us from taking action and make us have a victim mindset? That's the kind of the worst mindset you can have if you want to achieve success. It's more about what kind of mindset can help me achieve what I want to achieve, but at the same time, not constantly be dissatisfied and wanting more. Not constantly never being happy with whatever level of, whether it's financial success, whether it's recognition and awards, whatever it might be, reputation. Some people just never happy, right? We all know the people who they always want more. So how do we avoid falling into that trap? And also, how do we avoid falling into the trap of doing nothing and being powerless and being almost a victim? And it was a case of, we believed that it was about looking at unfair advantages. And not unfair. Unfair is quite a loaded word. It can mean unethical or something like that. But we don't mean it in that sense. I'm surely that exists, but hopefully nobody listening here wants to achieve wealth in that way, because ultimately it's not going to be satisfying. And if you believe that, there's other consequences and spiritual sides to that as well, that's going to affect you too. So hopefully in an ethical way, but doubling down on your unfair advantages. Now, by unfair advantages, I mean things where you already have a head start, things which you're already good at, or things where your circumstances or situation allows you to kind of exploit or, take advantage of or double down on. So that's kind of the way I would look at unfair advantages.
Should people now, like you said, nowadays we look at our strengths. I'm good at public speaking. I'm good at, I don't know, whatever I'm good at. But should people start looking at their unfair advantages as well and sort of weighing them up when they want to choose a career or when they want to take a path?
Absolutely. So I think it starts with self-awareness. So one of the oldest philosophical things, back to, I think it was Plato or Aristotle, they said, know thyself. Socrates, it could be any of those Greek philosophers.
Yeah.
And they said, know thyself, know yourself. So you have to have knowledge of yourself. And to be honest, it takes time to know yourself. It takes a lot of time and reflection to know, okay, what am I actually good at? You have to speak to people. You have to get feedback. You have to work in different environments. You have to try different things in your life to figure out what you're good at. So knowing yourself is knowing not just what you're good at, what your personality is like. And that's another way to look at why we came up with this concept in the book is we'd often be asked, how do I, for example, should I do a postgrad degree, or should I just go ahead and start my own business and learn by doing rather than doing an MBA, for example? Or should I quit my job to focus on my business, or should I kind of stay at my day job and work on the side? And these kinds of questions that I would get and Ash would get asking for advice. And the answer is, it depends.
On yourself.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on your personality. It depends on your goals, your why. It depends on your situation right now. So somebody who's got a lot of dependents, got a lot of children, maybe he's got young children and his wife is at home, he doesn't have a big pot of savings to dive into. It'll be different for him compared to somebody who's single, lives with his parents, he's just graduated university, and a business idea that he's had is getting some traction. Like, the advice is going to be different. So the way I like to think of it is just like how slowly medicine is becoming more personalized. They say the technology in medicine is going to be to check out people's DNA and figure out what's the right medicine for them, what's going to work for them, or even diet. Like, what's the best diet for me based on my DNA?
Yeah, each person is different.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas we had a one-size-fits-all approach until now. Similar for advice and self-help, right? You have to look at your own situation. It's going to be different for everyone.
It's amazing that you say this. Each person's different, and you need to know yourself. And the Imam Ali, the cousin of the Holy Prophet, says, "Man arafa nafsah arafa rabbah." Someone who knows himself knows his Lord. And I always think when I read that, if you know yourself, you know your God, or you know your Lord. I think, what does that even make sense? How will you know God by? And then it makes sense, because the more you know yourself, the more you'll know what you want to do. The more our life is a journey. One journey could be, getting closer to God. So it's important, I feel, that each person, and this is a really good point, I think, about this whole unfair advantage that you make, that each person is unique in their own way, and each person will have different strengths, different unfair advantages, as you call
Absolutely.
them. It's for some reason it sounds like a negative thing.
Yeah. It's a good
You know,
point.
the fact that it's an unfair advantage, but
You know,
it's kind of it's a good thing to have an unfair
it's a good thing to
advantage.
have. It's something that is part of the marketing genius of Ash Ali to come up with that as a term.
Yeah.
It's a term that has already been used as well in
Yeah.
some cases for startups. Like,
Yeah.
they have an unfair advantage. They have some special intellectual property that they're using, or they have that
So
some superstar on their
just
team.
so I understand, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just so I understand. So, a male person, a man,
Mhm.
going for an interview for a manager, for a role at a bank to be a manager, has an unfair advantage over a woman in some cases. Is that
In some cases, yeah. Like, maybe as a generalization, we'd say yeah,
As a
because the stereotypically they would expect a man to be a manager. It's more common, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in some cases, or in most cases,
and again, I'm generalizing, so
Yeah.
it's not the case all the time. Or a white male over, I don't know,
possibly, yeah,
an Arab or
yeah,
non-white.
absolutely. And it might not even be because he's white.
Yeah.
It might be because, for example, some companies, they like to choose candidates for jobs based on, or like to recruit based on culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're using culture fit, how well does he fit in? Does that mean he'll go and join us at the pub for drinks after work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way that, for example, us as Muslims can feel a bit, or the ones that don't drink. Some people don't drink even because when they're not Muslim, they'll feel excluded, right?
So that's an unfair disadvantage.
It's a disadvantage, right? Exactly. So that's the thing. It's a case of, there are unconscious bias, and in some cases, unfortunately, conscious biases that people have,
Mm-hmm.
and to completely ignore them is to just be blind to it and just to delude oneself. And to completely focus on them and over focus on them is only to make yourself a victim, and it's almost going to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So if people are constantly thinking about that, oh no, they're not going to hire me because I'm Muslim, I'm a bit brown, I have a beard, I don't drink with them. If they've constantly got it in their heads, it's probably going to screw with them more than it's going to help them, right?
Yeah.
So it's a case of being aware of what obstacles may exist, but taking action anyway, and kind of figuring out ways to work around that. So I think on a global level, on a policy level, we want to try and reduce any opportunities. We want to level the playing field when it comes to opportunities. But at the same time, on a personal level, we're kind of aware of where they are, sort of work the system, It's kind of like a game. Let me play the game as it is. This is the situation.
Make the best out of it.
Yeah, make the best out of it. Exactly.
You touched upon success.
Yeah.
You mentioned Elon Musk from Tesla. Or someone like Bill Gates or whoever. Is wealth the barometer for success, or is being on the front page of a magazine?
Yeah, good question.
Forbes, is that the barometer or the scale to say that this person is successful? And what is success? How would you define success, and what's the scale for it?
So that's a really, really good question. And something I was very aware of when I was doing my talk and when writing the book. It's the fact that, and we even touched on this in the book many times, it's the fact that success is not just financial. Success is not just about recognition and being on the cover and being famous. So it's not just about riches and fame and stuff like that at all. But at the same time, and one of the ways that self-development is broken down, which I like, is kind of like health, wealth, relationships, and then you have spirituality as well. And one could be successful in all four of these areas, could be successful in one could be, do you know what I mean? So it's only one out of those, right? What's the point of financial success when you have no relationships? What's the point of all of that when you don't have any, you're not happy inside yourself because your spiritual side is not taken care of with God or with whatever you may believe. So it's a case of thinking about success holistically. And it's a case of thinking about, and not overlooking. See, sometimes we become too focused on the other areas and we feel like, oh, wealth is a bit difficult. I'm not even going to try that one, right? I'm not even going to try and have impact in wealth, because look at with wealth, you could make a lot of change in the world, right? There are other ways of making change in the world as well, of course, don't get me wrong. But it's one of the ways that you can have impact. You can help people who are in need. You can launch projects that really help a lot of people and help society and help the environment in whatever ways there might be.
I mean, again, I mentioned Elon Musk because sometimes when I see his interviews, or even when I read some of his tweets, or I feel like he's not really doing it for the money sometimes, or most of the times actually.
Absolutely.
He's just doing it to actually make a change.
Yeah.
Even the whole Tesla car thing, he's actually doing it to make a change, and I think obviously I'm not in his mind, but he's put wealth as a secondary thing to what he actually wants to achieve.
Yeah.
And then wealth is just like an added bonus.
Agreed.
But in fact, his main sort of aim, and I use him as an example because I follow him on Twitter and I see what he writes about. Sometimes I think he's lost the plot, but I feel that he hasn't he's not doing it for the money.
Yeah, I get the same impression. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not as uncommon as we think. Not all of them. I think a lot of them I don't think Jeff Bezos is motivated by money only, like it's especially not at this stage. Like what? But I think it's just a way for them to keep score. It reaches that level where it's like, oh, it's just a scoreboard item, and this can be unhappy chasing it. I've heard from people who kind of sometimes are mentors or coaches. When I hear interviews of those people who work and know super successes like that, financial successes, and oftentimes they can have very unhealthy kind of mindsets where they just always want more, that kind of insatiable appetite. And by the way, reaching such incredible highs, these people are very driven, like incredibly ambitious and driven, and they never show that side publicly. Somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, he seems so soft-spoken,
chilled,
and nice, and chilled out. This guy, if you read about his biography, and you'll see that he used to bang the table and they used to shout in their board meetings, domination about Facebook. Like, this is the kind of fervor and like, drive that they've got. And I think partly it can be just genetic. Like, they're literally just born with this, like they have this thing inside them where they just want more and more. And of course it's, it's a nature nurture type of thing. And of course it's their environment, it's the early success, and then the position of power and believing they can have a change. And then when you have success, you get surrounded by yes men, people saying yes to you constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can go off the rails a little bit sometimes. Who knows? Like, it's very difficult for them to stay emotionally stable when they're in such positions
of power.
Yeah.
I guess with a Muslim person, he's always got to keep himself in check. That's the beauty of having to pray maybe 5 times a day as a Muslim, where you sort of keep yourself in check. But I want to come back with this. What we touched upon at the beginning, which was the American dream, or it's portrayed in what's the film called? Will Smith's film, which you mentioned as well.
The Pursuit
of Happiness. That's the one. Maybe it's not sort of the best example to give of the American dream, because but with you mention it in your TED talk. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because it's a great film.
Yeah.
It gets you a bit emotional as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know anyone that's seen that film that said, I didn't shed a tear. But when you mention it, I want to ask you why you mentioned that. And for someone, a lot of people might see this and say, "Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah,
I can't achieve that." Where I think he's got his son with him, and he kind of loses the plot.
Yeah,
but at the end, the title is very strong. It's not the pursuit of success or the pursuit of wealth or the pursuit of it's happiness.
So the reason I mentioned that film is because it really epitomizes this belief in meritocracy, that anybody, it's supposed to be ultimately, not during it, but ultimately a feel-good movie, because it's a happy ending. Sorry to spoil it for anyone, but but it's and the idea is that and we say the American dream, we're living here in the UK, right? But honestly, I feel like with American culture and the Western culture, there's not too much difference. We have a little bit more of a class system here in the UK, but there's not too much difference. Nowadays, it's kind of the belief all over the Western world, and even in developing countries as well. In India, it's quite common as well. And I believe that as an audience, you're expected to feel like everything, by the end of that movie, everything is right with the world. You're supposed to, I get the sense that you're supposed to feel like, yes, we live in this land of opportunity, for example, the USA. And this isn't an attack on America in any way in that sense at all. But I'm just saying that it's part of their mythology. Part of their mythology is the American dream. Part of their mythology is this kind of work hard and you can make something of yourself. And you're supposed to be leaving that movie feeling like, yeah, everything's good. He got the job in the end. Everything's happy. He now works for that bank. But when you really think about it, why did he have to go through so much? Why is it because he's a black man and he didn't have the opportunities? And of course, it's a whole bunch of different reasons. It's not just the color of his skin or the race that he is. But it's all intertwined, right? And in America, race is a bigger issue. Maybe here in the UK, it might maybe definitely a little bit be more class, let's say. But it's a case of he didn't have the education that some of these guys who are working in Wall Street have.
Why didn't he have it?
Exactly. And why didn't he have the private schools and then go to the Ivy League universities and be given the career advice from his father and an internship because he tipped him off? And again, don't get me wrong, the people who go into Wall Street or who go into the city in London, for example, it doesn't mean that they just got it purely through luck. It doesn't mean that they haven't worked for it.
Hard, yeah.
But it's a nuanced argument. It's to say that they were also set up for success. And that's the conclusion that I come to in my TED Talk, is the fact that I believed from the success that I had, I was able to set up a business and to have passive income coming in while I was able to travel. That was like my dream, and I couldn't believe that's actually possible, but I really achieved it after 2 years. And I felt like, yeah, I'd achieved this, I'd worked hard, and I kind of felt like I was patting myself on the back. And then I realized, no, actually, when I saw as I recalled in the talk, when I saw some poor kids when I was in the Philippines, and I realized, and they were begging in the street, I realized, like, what have they done? Is it because they haven't worked hard enough? Is it because they haven't believed hard enough and they're in that situation? Not at all. It's not, we're not in control of what happens to us, where we're born, what happens to us in childhood, what kind of early education we have. None of that is under our control. So we can't believe in it. There's also like a really good comic. It's about privilege. Mm-hmm. And I'll show it to you as well afterwards, and maybe we can link it in the resources for this. It's a really nice comic of somebody brought up very, let's say, privileged and wealthy family and well-to-do versus a woman who isn't brought up in that kind of family, and the family's going through a lot of strife and struggle and people having ill health, and she was living in damp conditions and her parents were always working night shifts, so there was no one at home and she would just sit and watch TV, whereas the other guy, and it's a really good comic, the boy grows up where his parents are looking after him, and when he gets, for example, let's say B in his grades, his parents tell him you could do better, you should work harder. When the girl gets a B in her grade, her dad, who looks scruffy and probably does a menial job, maybe works nights, tells her well done, like he's happy with that.
He's proud of it.
So it's those early differences that give people different advantages and disadvantages. And then now again we go back to not having a victim mindset. Let's say you're listening to this and you didn't have such a privileged background. Does that mean that you should feel sorry for yourself or feel like a victim?
And then you end up giving up.
Yeah, not at all, because there are really opportunities out there. Will Smith did make it by the end of that film. Mm-hmm. But the question is, do we all have equal opportunities? Do we all have the same opportunities in front of us? For example, I'm a fluent speaker in English, right? Because I came when I was 3 years old from Baghdad to London.
You studied here,
everything.
Primary, secondary, up until...
My English is stronger than my Arabic. And that's lucky, because if I came with a strong accent, the opportunity would be different. Would I be able to speak publicly so well on stage? I doubt it. Would I be able to write to be able to get a publishing deal? I don't think so. Similar with working with clients and things like that. There's a lot of stuff that happens to us which we overlook. You know, the kind of things that give us an advantage. And then there's the flip side, which is the double-edged sword idea, which is the idea that it doesn't necessarily mean just because it seems like an advantage, it is one, right? You can turn with the right mindset an advantage into or a disadvantage into an advantage. So one of the examples that we like to give of that is of my co-author Ash, who grew up in a very poor family. His dad worked in a factory. He didn't go to university. He didn't, they were very poor growing up, and that gave him the hunger to succeed. that made him more creative in the sense of like he can market his business and do things more creatively, as opposed to if he had more money, he'll just spend it on advertising rather than creatively thinking of ways of promoting his business, for example. And that's what made him eventually build up a career and get a job with Just Eat and then start his own startups after that. So it's a case of like, how do you turn your disadvantages into advantages? But at the same time, we have to know as a society, going back to the pursuit of happiness, it's the idea that why was it so difficult for Will Smith? Why did he have to struggle so much? Why is it so much easier for others? You know, it's that kind of mindset of this is something we have to ponder as a society.
It's amazing how in Islam as well, we're told that, you know, we say it in Arabic, I'll translate, you know, that Allah's written everything for you, even if it's your sustenance, your wealth, that's sort of being written for you. How, and as you beautifully mentioned that, you know, there's certain things that we don't control, where we're born, who our parents are, what background we're from, what country we were born in. All of that is sort of not our choice, and it sort of builds up to these advantages or disadvantages that we grow up with. I want to go back again something that we touched upon at the beginning, which was your degree was in economics.
That's right.
And then after that, you started your own business. How easy or difficult is it? I mean, a lot of people now that or maybe 10 years ago I'm talking about, because that's when I finished university or longer. As soon as you finish university, you sort of want to get into a job.
Yeah.
And then do your 9-to-5s. Especially if you're in a field where there's a demand for. The more sort of business, economics, again, there are jobs for that as well. But I've noticed, and again, this is from the people that are around me, that most people now are thinking about starting up their own business as soon as they finished university. What do you think the difference is, and how can someone choose to get into a job or start up their own business? What should they be looking at with the unfair advantages or with their capabilities? I'm talking about someone who's just finished uni, he's single, living with his parents. What should he be looking at? What advice would you give?
Good question. So I actually had a job. I had 2 jobs after university, both in the city.
What year did you graduate? Sorry,
2011.
Okay,
so about 8 years ago now.
Okay.
And what I did is I didn't know what career path to take. Honestly, I had no idea. And I think a lot of people, especially with this younger generation, they have older brothers, sisters, cousins, whoever it might be, to advise them. And I feel like I didn't have as many people to advise, whether if in Iraqi culture it's like going to be either a doctor, or you're going to be an engineer,
or a pharmacist,
if you can't,
dentist.
So that's the thing. It's a case of like, we didn't have the guidance, and it's not fully our parents' fault as well, because they didn't grow up in the society, and life was even different back then. So even for people who grew up here, and people who, English people who, things have changed so much since their generation, since our parents' generation to us.
There's a big gap, I feel, between the last generation and this generation.
And jobs never existed before exist now. There never used to be social media managers. There never used to be digital marketers. What's SEO, search engine optimization? What is all this stuff? This isn't all recognized career paths. This is all new stuff. And there's going to continue being new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Change is accelerating. That's the thing about opportunities now are different. Jobs are not for life anymore. Job security is not as high as it ever used to be. And people jump around from different jobs. And that's what I would actually advise, not to keep jumping around like ADD, but in the sense of if you've been at a company for, let's say, 3 to 5 years, you might consider trying to get some more experiences, some more opportunities, unless you're still learning. That's one of the key indicators that I tell people about. It's about, don't choose something that is about the pay or is about especially when you're young or just graduated. Think more about where do you learn the most, right? What kind of, and if you know what you love and what you're passionate about, then that's amazing. But I didn't. And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't. So I think you should just try things out and keep your mind open. Don't have like a stereotype about a certain field or a certain job or even about starting a business. Like maybe talk to people who've done it. Maybe give it a go yourself. When you're young, what you don't realize, you feel like every decision is so important. When ultimately you can experiment and test around and it's all okay. It's when you get older. And that's, again, part of the context. It's about age and what kind of situation you are in life. So you asked about starting your own business. It's never been easier to start your own business than it has been today. You could all you need to do is set up a website, and it's never been easier to set up a website.
Yeah.
You could just start selling stuff that you never even you never even see. There are people that start up businesses that do drop shipping, for example, who get stuff directly from China. They never even hold the stuff in their hands, and they get directly delivered to the customers, shipped to the customers. And all they do is just sell it on their online store. And that's the only thing that they've done. And they can have a lot of success with that. It's just about how they brand it, how they market it, how they sell it, how they get people's clicks and attention. So that's just one example of all the different ways that you can add value or create businesses. So the way I like to think of businesses is as solving problems. So there are a lot of problems that you can solve. But before, it used to be you have to get an office, and you used to have to get staff, and you have to get it registered, and you have to worry about all these different things.
Well, now it's much easier.
And now you don't need to think about all that. Just start selling something, whatever it might be, your services or it might be products, and start thinking about the stuff later. Once you've actually got sales, then you can start thinking about, okay, I need to register the company, I need to get an account, I need to do taxes and stuff like that. But people stop themselves by worrying about all these little issues when in fact they don't have a business yet, they have a hobby. Until they start making sales, then it's a business. So I think, if you're comfortable, if you live with your parents, if you don't have anything urgent, that for example, you don't have bills or stuff to pay or people to look after or children, then you should definitely give it a shot if you feel drawn to that, if you feel like there's something that you want to do. An entrepreneur, if you've always thought you'd want to be your own boss, but there's downsides to it as well. You don't have structure, you don't have a paycheck coming every month. You've got a lot of uncertainty in your life. I think it depends on your personality. It's
possible that, that's why I asked the question. I phrased my question. You're living with your parents. You've just finished university.
Yeah.
So I think and you've got like you said, a nice hobby of, I don't know, getting into becoming an entrepreneur or selling stuff. Then you can do that. Yeah. Again, we're going back to knowing yourself, and if you're married with kids, then and you need to pay rent and bills, then it's a different story. Absolutely. Then you can't really sit down and sell something from China.
Yeah. But the thing is, it depends on your parents as well. From our culture, imagine you just sit at home and say, "I'm doing an online business." What are you doing? Go get a job. What are you doing? Stay at home. So it depends if they could deal with that. If you can, it depends in so many different situations. If you feel like you have something to do, if you have an idea, you have some kind of thing to sell or some idea, or you can do some consulting, or you can build up a big follower on social media, or you have an app that you want to build and you want to try it out, see if you can sell it, see if it's solving a problem for people and they'll download it or pay for it. There's a lot of different things that you can consider. But because the barriers have come down to starting your own business, I think more people should give it a shot. I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone, but I think if you feel like you're drawn to it or you're curious about it, you should read up more. That's definitely something you could find out about.
What's that thing you mentioned? We're going to ask you about the miles. What is the word?
The miles framework.
Okay. We mentioned something at the start. I got a feeling that we teased the people watching, listening, but we didn't really explain or give them more of an idea about the miles framework, which you mentioned. Can you explain more on that?
Yeah, the miles framework is the framework that we've come up with to identify your unfair advantages, or to at least understand what kind of categories they fall into. So we called it the miles framework, which is an acronym for money. So money is an unfair advantage. Intelligence and insight, that's I. Location and luck is L. Education and expertise, that's E. And S is for status. So and status covers who you know as well, by the way, it's your connections.
Okay.
Because if you know people in high places, that increases your status.
Okay.
So it's all of these different factors, these 5 different ways of breaking it down, you don't need to have all of them, for example, to be successful as an entrepreneur or even in life. Like a lot of these also apply to different career success as well. You don't need to have all of them, but what you need to do is rather than focus on where you're weak, focus on where you're strong.
So you might have all 5, but some might not be as strong, because I'm sure everyone has status some way, or everyone knows someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, we will have some degree of status.
Yeah,
but it's about where are you stronger? Where can you? So, for example, let's give as an example of a hugely successful app is WhatsApp. Everyone pretty much uses WhatsApp now.
Yeah,
it was founded by Hasan Kubba in Silicon Valley back in, I think, 2007 or something around that time. And it was all based on the idea of, initially, it wasn't actually a messaging app. It was about putting your status, which is why till now you could put a status, like at the gym or something. People say busy. That was the original idea that Jan had.
Just to put a status up.
Just to put a status up for people to know what you're up to now. That was his initial concept. And then push notifications came in as a feature on the iPhone. And then suddenly he thought, I could use this for messaging. And the unique thing was it uses your contact book as opposed to different usernames. So it just uses phone numbers as a username, basically. So what happened with WhatsApp is Hasan Kubba, where was he strong in? Like, let's do an analysis of this guy. So he was a coder working for Yahoo. At the time, Yahoo, it's not too amazing now. Yahoo was doing very well in the mid-2000s and pays very good for a coder in Silicon Valley, a very good coder. And he actually had savings of $400,000.
That's good to start off
nice,
with.
nice little nest egg.
400,000 savings.
And he took time off from his job at Yahoo and he thought, I wanted to try an idea. And iPhone had just come out. App Store was coming out soon. I think he'd heard about, so he thought, let me code something for the App Store. So he founded it by himself. He started to build it. So by the way, if you can see, money was an unfair advantage he had. Expertise, in the sense of coding. He could code their own app. So another unfair advantage under E. But what else did he have? He wasn't that good with social, typical kind of nerdy guy. Wasn't that great with his connections, with his social connections. He didn't know where because even 400,000, when you really start to build and grow big, you need more investment. So the way these work is they don't really, tech startups, what we call them, when they grow fast, they usually need funding to grow fast. They usually don't get enough profit or not make any profit at all in the case of something like Uber to even keep growing, right? So they grow from funding. So he needs to raise more funding. So he made friends with a guy called Brian Axon, who helped him raise another round of investment from other rich friends and family, and maybe it was angel investors at that time. And then he joined as a co-founder for that skill set. So rather than Hasan Kubba, the original founder, trying to build up his social skills and network and do fundraising, he got somebody else to partner with him who's good at that. And so he got equity in the business, and then they came 2 co-founders in WhatsApp. I think it was 2, if I remember correctly. So that shows you how
use his unfair advantages.
Yeah, use yours, and then you can partner up with people or delegate or hire in the other things that you're not good at. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that I see what you're saying, but again, it's maybe again I'm not into so much right now starting off my own business, but I if I was 21, again, you said it's the best time for anyone to start up a business. I understand why, because I'm not good with tech, but there's so many apps that make everything so easy for you. Even if you want to start up your own website. My only worry, and I'm thinking again of sort of maybe the Muslim or the Iraqi or someone around our communities. The problem they're going to face, and you touched upon this, is he's going to tell his parents, family, that I'm doing it. He's sitting at home. He doesn't really have an office. Yeah. He's on his laptop, but I'm doing my own business at home. And how many people are going to be like to their kids, oh, okay, you can do that? Or how many potential wives or women are going to accept a husband that is starting up his own business?
Yeah.
And I feel that's why the older generation who came to the UK in the 80s and the 90s, and I'm talking again specifically just about Iraqis now here. They pushed their kids to do medicine or pharmacy or engineering because they thought they'll have secure jobs as soon as they finish their degrees.
Yeah.
And we don't have to worry about, their living costs. They'll be okay. Whereas now, if he wants to get married, he can't be saying, I've got an online business.
Yeah.
I'm selling some toys from China. Or I don't know. I'm selling. I know a guy, a Lebanese guy, and he's doing really well. He sells trainers online.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, that's a decent idea. But before you know it, he's now opening 2 stores in Kensington and one somewhere else in London as well. All from, just doing something online, selling all these fancy trainers. And the trainers are quite expensive.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of limited edition trainers. I'm known to that as well. But they're like £500-600 trainers. And again, he was telling me, that's why I'm asking this question. He was telling me I had so much difficulties trying to explain to my wife that I'm actually working when I'm sitting at home, and she thinks, I'm sitting in my PJs doing work online. So that's my only sort of worry even though you said it's easy, but for our communities, we have a disadvantage.
There's a solution.
Mm-hmm.
They call it a side hustle. It's quite fancy. That's
why I asked you this question, because you're going to find the solution. I knew it.
So you basically have to work really hard by doing it in your spare time. That's the key.
And have a job.
Have a job, because it's too risky. So there's two. We talk about this in the book. So the book is kind of broken down into talking about success a little bit and about life is unfair, let's say, and the introducing the concept of unfair advantages in part 1. Part 2 is all about the Miles framework and how you can find your unfair advantage. Part 3 is about how to start a startup. And what we break down in that part 3 is that there's 2 types of startups. One is a lifestyle startup. That's what we call it. Lifestyle startup makes you profit pretty much from the first sale, or almost from the first sale, let's say from your second or third sale, because you have low overheads. This is probably going to be an online digital business. You don't really have rents to pay and staff and payroll or anything like that. You pay some contractors, freelancers to do stuff for you online, and usually you find them and they're not going to be too expensive, and you just go for it. And by doing that, so for example, what I did is I started with doing websites and doing online marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lifestyle startup. The other type of startup is the ones you see the headlines of, the famous ones. You see Uber and Airbnb, and you see Google and Facebook and these ones. These companies weren't profitable from the beginning. These companies grew by raising funding and having more and more funding coming into them until one day they monetize. Uber still monetize and make a profit, Uber still hasn't made a profit. Amazon barely, sometimes it makes profit, sometimes it doesn't. It depends. The AWS arm makes a profit. The rest of it doesn't really, depending on which market you look at.
Mm-hmm.
And they just want to grow. So we call those hyper growth startups. For them, it's growth at all costs. They just grow. They don't care. They just keep raising funding and growing more. So those are the 2 types of startups. Now, the hyper growth startup is much riskier than the lifestyle startup. Because if you work on an app and one day I'll have enough users and put advertising on the app, then we'll make money. Good luck with that. It's really difficult. But some people can do it. Some people have the unfair advantages necessary to go for it. But for most of us, a lifestyle startup might be more something that we go down the path of. So especially if you're just thinking from scratch of what to do and you don't have coding skills and you don't know about the startup world. It's more a case of doing something on the side. Doing something on the side while you have a day job. You can make money, have your paycheck coming in, and at the same time you can work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's hard, but no one said this is going to be easy.
Yeah, if you want to do that, you manage your time.
Yeah,
and I think it's possible. That's why I asked you. I knew you'd find a solution. Finally, where do you see yourself in a few years? And is there anything new that we should look forward to? Is there a new book you've thought about?
Yeah.
What's happening in the next few years for yourself?
So the book is now available for pre-order. So the book is still not out. Out on the 9th of January 2020.
Very
inshallah.
Good, inshallah. The Unfair Advantage.
Available
on Amazon.
Amazon and also in bookshops.
Very
Waterstones,
MashaAllah.
WH Smith Travel, hopefully. You'll see them in airports.
Inshallah.
So you'll
Very
see
good.
them everywhere. Because lucky enough to get a publishing deal and not having to self-publish it.
Very good.
What to look for. So that's what I'm going to be working towards, is promoting the book. Especially for the last few months of this year. And yeah, so you can even pre-order that from now. But what I really care about more is about how do we get underprivileged people to have the opportunities that myself and Ash have had, right? How do people who haven't grown up in an entrepreneurial family, by the way, if you see a lot of entrepreneurs today, a lot of the time it's their dad's business or their dad's money, being able to invest that. And there's no shame in that, by the way.
That's an unfair advantage.
It's an unfair advantage of money, and also of you kind of get the status, you get that, and you get the expertise brought down from your family who's been in business for so many years, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Most people do this sort of thing. But if you're completely starting from scratch, it's so difficult. Like, that's how I was myself. Like, I didn't know any entrepreneurs to speak to. It was completely from scratch. I found an online course. I took that course and I learned about how to start my own business, and I went from there. So our goal is to help to develop people to become entrepreneurs, to help start their startup, to grow their startup, to raise funding for their startup. Those are the 3 areas we want to help with. We want to help underprivileged people who don't know about the opportunities of building up a lot of wealth by leveraging technology, why are the richest people in the world right now usually part of some kind of IT or technology thing, whether it's Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. These guys, it's because you could really highly leverage technology. It doesn't cost any more money or hardly any more money for more people to join Facebook for Facebook, but they can sell more advertising on them, right? Or it doesn't cost that much. Even back in the day when they used to sell Windows CDs, those CDs cost hardly anything. But the software itself is infinitely reproducible. But each item, unlike an object that you buy, a chair or something, each time they manufacture the chair is going to cost them a lot of money. When they make more software, it doesn't really cost anything. When more people download your app, it's not going to cost you hardly any more money, if anything. So that's why technology can leverage. You can get suddenly the whole world opens up as a market. You could start selling to people all over the world. And that's why there's so much opportunity. So I want to open up those opportunities of accelerating technology. I want to let people be aware of the advantages that they have. I want to help entrepreneurs to do more with their life and hopefully to have the social impact as well. So I want to do a social impact company where we can help people who come from underprivileged background, who might not be able to afford the courses or workshops that we run. I want to be able to help those people. I want to give advice to people who don't have that advice already. So that's really where I'd like to go with this. Maybe even help in Iraq or the Middle East or other developing countries like Indonesia or something.
Inshallah. I think especially the Middle East and some parts that are underprivileged, they need that support. That probably they have these advantages. They just don't know how to make the best out of them.
Absolutely.
And with your help, inshallah, they can. Hasan, thanks for coming today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thanks for having me.